StrayAllDay.com.
You're now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day, to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques all underneath the umbrella of one unified philosophy that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is competitive stamina. That's the topic here today, competitive stamina. But before I get into that, I'll explain to you what that means in a moment and what you need to do with and about it. But before we do that, I'll remind you all two things. First of all, my daily motivation and Monday motivation messages guaranteed to have you focused, sharp, and on point to start your day or your week, respectively. All you got to do is be a member of my texting community. It is free to join. Just send a text to the following number, 305-384-6894. Once we start sending that message again, you'll be getting it straight to your phone. Again, my daily and Monday motivation messages. Secondly, that number is down below in the description. Work on Your Game University. All right. If you would like to have me as your direct coach, you'd like to get into our program based around mindset, strategy, systems, and accountability for taking your game, your life, your business, your career, your personal things, your professional things, all to their highest possible level with me as your direct coach in the process, go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. You can see what it's about, what we're doing, and how to get started. That out the way, let's get into the topic, which is competitive stamina. The definition of stamina, all you know what competitive is, right? Competitive is about competition, getting into anything where there's a competition, not everybody can win. Stamina is defined as the ability to sustain prolonged physical or mental effort. This masterclass is all about your ability to continue to compete, which means trying to achieve a win when going against resistance or dealing with any form of friction or pushback from the world, from other people, from circumstances, maybe even from yourself. That's what this is about. And you're going to need stamina to do that. When you're dealing with friction and pushback and opposition, you're going to need stamina, because every competition, there will be some form of opposition by definition. Because if there's no opposition, then you're not really competing. You're just doing whatever it is that you're doing. There's something that is opposing you. Even when you're competing against yourself, there's an opposition. The opposition is whatever you're trying to beat, whatever previous version of yourself you're trying to defeat. That is opposition. So there will always be opposition when you are competing, and you're going to need stamina for this. And whatever you're competing against is trying to stop you from getting to what you're trying to get to. So you got to be willing to fight through things in order to get to what you want. So the questions I'm going to ask here today are basically going to be a litmus test for where you are and to help you make any necessary adjustments when it comes to your competitive stamina. Point number one, topic once again today is competitive stamina. How long will you stay in the game? Simple question. Not always so easy to answer. Now, how long will you stay in the game is really your prediction, but let's look at the games that you've been in up to this point. How long have you stayed in them? Now, staying in the game is not necessarily a virtuous thing, depending on what game you stayed in, because you may stay in a game that you needed to exit a long time ago, and you stayed in it. Don't stay in the game just to say that you stayed in the game, because they say winners never quit, quitters never win. Well, the most successful people do quit. They quit the wrong things so they can do more of the right things. But when you're in the thing that's going to be the right thing, how long will you stay in the game? One of the reasons that I made it as a professional athlete is because on talent alone, I didn't have quite enough. I had enough to be eligible, but I didn't have enough to just make it just on talent. But I was able to persist long enough to create opportunities for myself. That's the reason why I made it as an athlete. I played 1 year in high school. I sat on the bench that 1 year. I walked on to play Division III college ball, which is, again, not a level that is some type of factory for professional athletes. So after that, nobody was offering me an opportunity to play at the pro level. And the only reason I played is not because eventually someone decided to give me a shot. The reason I played is because I kept trying even when no one was offering me an opportunity. And my career should have been over at the end of high school, or maybe before I even played in high school. Should have been over in college, should have been over after college, but it kept going simply because I kept trying. I was able to carve out a nearly decade-long career as a professional athlete because of my willingness to stay in the game, to keep trying, to keep selling myself, and keep creating opportunities where there appeared to be no opportunity. That's the reason why I was able to last. I was just willing to stay in the game longer than other players who may have been equal or even better than me with regards to talent, simply because I stayed in the game longer than they were able to stay in the game. And in the sports world, there's a certain baseline level of ability you must have to be eligible to play at the professional level. There's a certain level of talent or ability or game, whatever you want to call it, If you don't have that, you're not even eligible, let alone are you going to get a chance. Now, understand that just because you're eligible does not mean you're going to make it. I know a whole lot of athletes who had the ability to where they qualified to make it, but they still didn't make it because there were a whole bunch of others who wanted to make it too. And again, not everybody can get it. So I was at or above that level, but let's say there were 10,000 other players, 10,000 other players who wanted to play at the pro level just like me. The challenge is there are not 10,000 other jobs. There might be worldwide about 4,000 jobs for an American-born player to play professional basketball. About 4,000 total in the whole world. Now, 4,000 sounds like a lot of jobs, right? Well, understand that all 4,000 of those jobs are filled right now. So let's say whenever you're listening to this, let's say the season is happening, all 4,000 of those jobs, someone has one of them, right? So every season, does every basketball player in the world retire and a whole new group of players come and play? No, a lot of players play again the next year and the year after that and the year after that. So how many new jobs are open every year? Not all 4,000. Maybe a quarter of those jobs open up every year. So maybe 500 new jobs every year, maybe 400, 300 new jobs open up every year, something like that. So all the players who think they're good enough, all 10,000 of us, we're not competing for 4,000 jobs, which would still be a crapshoot for everybody. We're competing for maybe 400 jobs. So do you see how this can become very competitive? So how much competitive stamina do you have? Again, it goes back to our question. All right, so at that baseline level of ability, you are eligible, doesn't mean you're getting in. So I still had to outcompete a whole bunch of people to get my opportunities. And the way I outcompeted them was not necessarily by just being better than them at basketball, because that's hard to prove because it's very subjective. Who's better than who is extremely subjective. I learned how to sell myself. I learned how to market myself. I learned how to get my name out there. I learned how to get attention in ways that other players were not willing or able to get attention, which put me in a competition only with myself, not with everybody else. I didn't want to compete against the whole basketball space of all players out there because, again, how am I going to prove that I'm better than everybody? Very hard to prove. Only one person can actually have that position. There's only a few who are even eligible to have the conversation. We hear people arguing about who's the best basketball player of all time. These days, you hear people mentioning basically three names. They mention Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and Kobe Bryant. Those are three names that you hear mentioned. Now, there are other players who should be in that competition, but it ain't that many. How many others are in the competition for greatest of all time? You may hear a Bill Russell here and there. Maybe somebody mentions Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, maybe Magic Johnson, Larry Bird. That's about it. So the list of players who are even eligible to be in a conversation of the best ever at one thing, you have fewer than 10 people. You count them on your hands, how many people are even eligible to be in a conversation. So the point being, folks, you probably are not going to be in a position to say you're the best out of everybody at what you do. It's going to be hard to get a bunch of people who don't believe you're one of the best to say that you're one of the best. So you might not want to get into a who's the best competition, because that will require you swaying people's opinions. See, it's not objective to prove that you're the best all the time. If you can't even get into the race, then you can't prove that you're the fastest, right? So you may not want to get into a subjective who's better than who competition. You may want to change the terrain to something that you can win, which is what I did and how I was able to get my chance in sports. I was able to shift the terrain to something of, okay, let me get the attention of this person the way nobody else is getting their attention. So they're not considering me and 50 other people. They're only considering me because I'm the only one who showed up winning where I showed up. Does that make sense? This is one way that you can use your competitive stamina. It doesn't mean trying to beat everybody at the same race. Just run a different race. That's something you can do. One more thing on point number one. How much competitive stamina do you have to stay in the game and look for or create opportunities for yourself? This is what I'm describing about myself. I just looked for and created different ways of making opportunities for myself. And that's the reason why I was able to play at the level that I played for as long as I did. Point number two. Today's topic, once again, is competitive stamina. Number two, will you keep playing when you're either losing or it appears that you are losing? Can you keep playing in that situation? See, this one is all about mental toughness and determination, because frankly, most people quit as soon as it becomes obvious to them that they are either losing, and in the world we are living in today, when you believe other people think you're losing or other people can see that you're losing. A lot of people don't want to deal with the embarrassment of knowing that other people can see them, so they'll quit to avoid the embarrassment. They don't want other people to see their circumstance. They don't want other people to see their plight and see them losing, so they'll quit so that nobody can see them losing. Well, hey, I didn't lose. I didn't play. I quit. So it's not the same as losing. Actually, it is. Quitting is actual losing. And Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill laid out the 6 basic human fears. And one of them was the fear of criticism. And it wasn't at the top of the list, because at the top of the list was the fear of poverty, and which makes sense because Napoleon Hill wrote that book during the height of the Great Depression. The book came out in 1937. So I understand why the fear of poverty was the biggest fear he noticed. But if you put it out today, when we're not in the middle of a depression, I think the number one fear would be the fear of criticism, because that's the biggest thing people want to avoid these days, is being criticized, attacked, talked about negatively, ridiculed, or have an audience of people saying negative things to and about you for whatever reason, whether it is legit or not. A lot of people will do anything to avoid that criticism. And I think this is one of the reasons people quit, because they don't want to be criticized, ridiculed, laughed at, looked at, or known as a person who tried something that did not succeed, especially publicly. So if Mr. Hill was to rewrite Think and Grow Rich today, number one fear would be the fear of criticism, because that's what people are afraid of now. Now, these days, people still do have concerns about running out of money. It's always an issue in the back of people's minds. But the biggest thing now is, again, they don't want to lose or look like you're losing. Understanding the biggest winners in life are also the people who have been in the worst situations that look like either losses or they were actual losses. And that's one of the reasons why they became winners, because they learn how to turn losses into victories. Successful people are not people who just go through their entire lives undefeated and they have no blemishes on their record. They just simply learn how to turn losses into victories, or deal with losses and come back the next time and get a victory the next time. That's what makes a successful person successful. The fact that they are willing to come back. They have the mental toughness and the internal fortitude to keep trying, even when it appears that trying is not working. These are the stories that we like best, because who doesn't like a great comeback story? Well, some of your favorite movies there's a comeback story. Your favorite, it could be a Disney movie, it could be an R-rated movie. There's some form of comeback. There's some form of things are going good, and then there's a crash, and then it looks like everything's over, and then you try a couple things and they don't work, and it looks like you're going to quit, and then all of a sudden you come up with a new idea, and that new idea works, and now you're just a successful person, and you can tell everybody how successful you are now, and look at where I came from, and if I can do it, you can do it. That's a form of what they call in the narrative world, it's called the hero's journey. That is a rough outline of the hero's journey, and it's a real thing. There's a book called The Hero's Journey. It was written by two screenplay guys. So any of you who doesn't know this, that when people put together movies, they actually will look at their movies. And these two authors, I forget these guys' names. Let me see if I can find it, because I know I have this book in my library. And in this book, these guys explain exactly how the hero's journey works and how they put any story together in such a way that it follows the hero's journey arc. So this book is called The Hero's Journey, and is written by Joseph Campbell, and I'm looking at the wrong, I know I have this book. Oh, here it is. The Hero's Two Journeys. No, it's a different book. I got the wrong author. So The Hero's Two Journeys is Michael Haig and Christopher Vogler. Now, these guys are actual screenplay writers. They actually write movies. And these two guys said that they are often consulted by famous actor Will Smith, and Will Smith would bring his scripts to those guys and have them look at the script and ask them, hey, does this follow the right journey to where it would really be a hit with audiences? So if y'all think people put together movies and they just throw them together, any of you who works in the cinema space, you know that that's not what happens. But any of you who thought that is not the case. People are really painstaking when it comes to laying out their scripts and making sure it tells the story arc in the right way that it will stick with audiences, because a lot of money goes into movies and you want to get a lot of money out. And Will Smith, being an A-list actor that he is, one of the reasons that he is because he studies the scripts and he wants to make sure that the script goes the way that it will be a high-level movie. And I think we can agree Will Smith has been in a whole bunch of high-level action movies because there's the hero's journey that he makes sure that his scripts always follow. So he would bring his scripts to these two guys. Names is Michael Haig and Christopher Vogler. The book is called The Hero's Two Journeys. And the way the book is laid out is not even really a book. It's these two guys sound like they're in like a what do you call it? Like a class that they did. And they're talking to a bunch of people who I guess are screenwriters or actors or actresses. And they're just laying out what happens in the book, or not books, but stories, and how to make sure the journey is laid out the right way. They're just walking people through it and talking through it. It's not even really written as a book. It's kind of just a recorded conversation that they wrote down and turned into a book, which is completely fine. I'm just helping you understand. If you want to read the book, that's what it is. So these days, as I said, more people are worried about losing in front of an audience, but the most successful people are the people who have lost, but they kept going and they won. And that's why they become heroes. And that's what the hero's journey is about. That it looks like it's a loss, and then you find a way back. Now, there's a whole up and down to it, a whole roller coaster to the process, but this is a a strategic thing that gets done. That's what the point that I want you to get. It's not just something random that people do. It's a strategic process. So my question to you, since everybody loves a comeback story, how many comeback stories do you have in your life? How many times has it looked like you were losing and you stayed in the game and you ended up winning? You came back and turned what was or what looked like a loss into a win. I already told you in my own story, there were many times at every level of sports that it looked like the game was pretty much over for me. And had I been a reasonable, logical person, the game would have been over for me. And I kept playing, extended the competition, and I was competing not against other players. I was really competing against circumstances, and I was able to win. And that became the foundation. Those experiences became the foundation of what work on your game is all about and why I'm talking to you right now today. I just found ways to win. And it's one of the reasons why someone like myself and others who have comeback stories, and many people who are in the influencer space, if you listen to them enough, you'll hear their comeback story. They all have one. And it's one of the reasons why I have the authority and the credibility to talk about things the way that I do now is because of my willingness to stay in the game when it didn't look good. And it's one of the reasons why I make sure to remind you of this background of mine is not by accident, because it is lending credibility to everything else that I say. And people need to know why you have the credibility to say what you say. If they don't know, they won't listen. Point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is competitive stamina. Number 3, can you win a long game or can you only win short games? Are you a sprinter or a distance runner? All right, personally, I'm a distance runner. All right, metaphorically speaking. And I like to literally running. I haven't run a marathon. I've run 2 marathons and completed them, but I most like the 6 to 9 mile distance. The marathon's a little bit, takes too much training to get ready for a marathon. I don't like doing it, and it eats up too much muscle at the same time. But anyway, what I mean here is metaphorical. I'm a distance runner. So the longer the race, the more likely it is I'm going to win. In my experience, most people can only win short races because they don't have enough attention span, discipline, persistence, or structure in their lives to where they can perform at a high level over an extended period of time. Some people can perform at a high level for a short period, but if you require them to do it over and over and over again over an extended period, most people don't have the discipline to do it. It's not that they don't have the talent or the potential, they just don't have the discipline. And discipline is one of my superpowers. If you want to call it a superpower, it's kind of tongue in cheek because it's a thing that anyone has access to. Whereas a superpower is usually something that someone has that nobody else, they have some exclusive right to it. I don't have an exclusive right to discipline, but most people have no discipline. So that separates me from them. Okay. Anyone can come up with a combination of good timing, luck, and talent at one random time. And for a short period, look amazing. But can you do it consistently for a long time? See, a long race requires all of those things that I just mentioned, but you got to apply them strategically, systematically, and consistently. That's where people fall off. Having a strategy, a system, and being consistent. Most people do not have all 3 of these elements at the same time for anything in their lives, not one thing. Most human beings are just unwilling or incapable of doing this. Or they think they're incapable. They're just mostly unwilling. And this is why the most successful people run long races. All right, this is why I'm not a sprinter. All right, you can lose a sprint to someone who has no business even being in a race, let alone winning the race, and they don't have any skill. But you will come across people who, again, can for a sprint look amazing, but can they win a marathon? Again, this is metaphorical. So when I was in college, I came across many players who, in my assessment, were garbage on the court. I just felt like they weren't shit players. But for a period of time, if you watch them just for that period, you would say, all right, this player might be one of the best players over here. And you could say for a period, this guy's career is outpacing Dre's career at certain snapshots. There were many players who I feel, looking back, if I was to assess their games, I'd say this player wasn't shit. But there are periods for that exact player who I just said wasn't shit. It looked like their career was going better than mine. The fact that I solved all those problems and made sure that in the long run that wasn't the case is because I was able to stay in the game long enough to, again, fix that issue, remedy that situation. So the long run, I erased all those problems and I erased all those conversations because I was willing to play the long game. And I was setting myself up to win the long game. Not just play the long game, but win the long game. And this is why I say I'm a distance runner, so you can understand this. The longer the distance, the more likelihood I'm going to win. You might be winning the short part of the race, but you ain't going to win the whole race. And that's a mentality, folks. That's not a skill set. That's a mentality, which means any of you can adopt it at any time. You just have to learn how to install it and how to make it real in your life. That's the reason why we have Work on Your Game University. I'll tell you more about that in one moment. First, let's recap today's class, which is competitive stamina, defined as stamina as the ability to sustain prolonged physical or mental effort Everybody's going to need this if you're going to get into anything that is competitive and anything that's worthwhile in life. There will be competition for it. Number one, how long can you stay in the game? One of the reasons I made it as an athlete because I was willing to stay in the game much longer than a lot of people, even those who have more talent and resources and access than I did. Number two, will you keep playing even when you're losing or it appears that you are losing? Most people, their answer is no, they will not. Most people quit at the first sign that things are not going well. They mentally give up if they don't tangibly and physically give up. And the person who is willing to stay in the game doesn't mean you will never lose. It means you take the loss or you take whatever looks like a losing situation and you keep going, and that's how you end up winning because you stay in the game. And the successful people in life are those who dealt with the losses and came back and kept going. Number three, can you win a long game or can you only win short games? Most people can only win short games because most people do not have long-term discipline, which means no long-term consistency and no long-term dependability. The most successful people, though, are long-term discipline. They are consistent and they can be depended on because they show up on a consistent basis. If you want to learn how to apply these things in your own life, this is through our Bulletproof Mindset Framework, our 30 Days of Discipline program, our ASAP Confidence, our Work on Your Game system, and more, all with me as your direct coach in the process. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre, all